The warning beacon had been active for 3,000 years. It broadcast in 47 languages, most of them dead, all of them carrying the same message: stay away from the planet below. The Galactic Council had placed the beacon there long before most current species had achieved spaceflight. They called the planet Zarvethos, which translated roughly to the place of sleeping death. No one remembered exactly what had happened on Zarvethos. The records were incomplete, fragments of data corrupted by time and war. What remained told of an ancient civilization that had pushed too far, learned too much, and ultimately destroyed themselves. The Council had sealed the planet and forbidden any exploration. The ruins below contained knowledge that was too dangerous for any species to possess. For 3,000 years, the beacon had done its job. Ships from 100 worlds had passed through this sector, detected the warning, and moved on. The Velkai had considered landing there once, but their elders had convinced them otherwise. The Sorthani had debated sending a drone, but ultimately decided the risk was not worth the reward. Even the Krix, who feared nothing in the known galaxy, had respected the ancient warning. Then the humans came. Captain James Walker stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Curiosity and stared at the planet filling the viewscreen. It was a beautiful world, covered in purple forests and silver oceans. White clouds drifted across its surface. From orbit, it looked peaceful, inviting even. "The beacon is broadcasting again," said Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, the ship's communications officer. She was young, fresh out of the academy, and this was her first deep space mission. "Same message as before. Do not approach. Planet is forbidden. All who land will face consequences." "Consequences from who?" asked Commander David Okonkwo, the ship's second in command. He was a large man with a deep voice and a skeptical mind. "The civilization that put up that beacon died 3,000 years ago. Who exactly is going to enforce this warning?" "That's a good question," said Walker. He had been a captain for 15 years, and he had learned that the universe rarely gave you straight answers. "Has anyone actually landed on this planet since the beacon went up?" "No, sir," said Tanaka. "I checked with the Council database before we entered the sector. No recorded landings, no surveys, no probes, nothing." Walker nodded slowly. He had expected that answer, but it still surprised him. 3,000 years was a long time. Species rose and fell in that span. Empires were built and destroyed. Technologies advanced beyond recognition. And yet this one planet had remained untouched, protected by nothing more than a warning. "What do we know about the original inhabitants?" he asked. "Very little," said Dr. Alina Vasquez, the ship's lead scientist. She was sitting at her station, scrolling through data on her screen. "They were called the predecessors by the Council records. They were an advanced species, probably level 7 or 8 on the Kardashev scale. They had been spacefaring for at least 50,000 years before their civilization collapsed." "What caused the collapse?" Vasquez shrugged. "The records don't say. There are references to an experiment of some kind, something that went wrong, but the details are missing. Either they were lost or they were deliberately erased." Walker found that interesting. Erased records suggested that someone, at some point, had wanted to hide what happened here. That meant there was something worth hiding. "Captain," said Okonkwo, "I know what you're thinking, and I have to advise against it. The Council has strict rules about forbidden zones. If we land on that planet, we could face serious consequences. They might revoke our exploration license. They might even impound the ship." "They might," Walker agreed. "But think about what's down there, David. A level 7 or 8 civilization, 50,000 years of knowledge, technology that could advance our species by centuries, and no one has touched it in 3,000 years. There's probably a reason for that." "Yes, there is. Fear." Walker turned to face his crew. There were 23 people on the Curiosity, all of them volunteers, all of them driven by the same need to explore, to discover, to push the boundaries of what was known. The Council species are old. They've been around for millions of years, some of them. They've seen civilizations rise and fall. They've learned to be cautious, to avoid risk, to play it safe, and that caution has kept them alive. He paused, letting his words sink in. But we're not like them. Humans have only been spacefaring for 200 years. We're new to this. We're still learning, and we didn't get this far by playing it safe. We got here by taking risks, by pushing boundaries, by going into places where we were told not to go. "Captain," said Tanaka softly, "are you saying we should ignore the warning?" "I'm saying we should investigate it. The beacon tells us to stay away, but it doesn't tell us why. 3,000 years ago, something happened on that planet. Something so terrible that the Council sealed the entire world and erased the records. Don't you want to know what it was?" There was silence on the bridge. Walker could see the conflict on his crew's faces. They were scientists and explorers, driven by curiosity, but they were also rational beings, capable of understanding danger. The warning beacon was ancient and mysterious, and mysteries were often dangerous. Finally, Okonkwo spoke. "If we do this, we do it carefully, full protective gear, armed escorts, regular check-ins with the ship. At the first sign of trouble, we pull out." Walker nodded. "Agreed. We're not going down there to die, we're going down there to learn. There's a difference." "I hope so," said Vasquez. "Because if that beacon is right, whatever killed the predecessors might still be down there waiting." The Curiosity began its descent toward the forbidden world. As it passed the warning beacon, the ancient device increased its broadcast, sending out pulses of light and sound that could be detected across half the sector. It was as if the beacon itself was crying out, trying desperately to turn the ship back. But humans had never been good at following warnings. The landing site was a clearing in the purple forest, about 2 kilometers from the nearest ruins. Walker had chosen this location carefully. It was far enough from the ruins to give them time to assess the situation, but close enough to reach on foot. The ship's sensors had detected no life signs in the area, no energy signatures, no movement of any kind. Whatever had happened here 3,000 years ago had left the planet silent and still. The away team consisted of 8 people. Walker led the group, with Okonkwo as his second. Vasquez came to study the ruins, accompanied by her assistant, a young man named Thomas Chen. 4 security officers rounded out the team, each of them armed with pulse rifles and trained for combat in hostile environments. They stepped off the ship and into a new world. The air was cool and clean, with a faint scent of something sweet, like flowers or fruit. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard, making their steps feel almost bouncy. The purple trees towered above them, their branches spreading out like umbrellas, filtering the sunlight into soft patches of gold and violet. "It's beautiful," said Tanaka, who had insisted on joining the team despite having no scientific training. She had argued that someone needed to document the expedition, and Walker had eventually agreed. "Don't let the beauty fool you," said Okonkwo. "Pretty places can be just as deadly as ugly ones." They began walking toward the ruins. The forest was quiet, almost eerily so. There were no birds singing, no insects buzzing, no animals rustling in the undergrowth. The only sound was their own footsteps and the soft whisper of wind through the leaves. "This is strange," said Vasquez after about 15 minutes of walking. "A planet this lush should be teeming with life, but I'm not detecting anything. No fauna at all, just the plants." "Maybe whatever happened here killed the animals," said Chen. "Extinction events aren't uncommon on dead worlds." "But the plants survived. Why would an extinction event kill all the animals but leave the plants intact?" No one had an answer to that question. They reached the edge of the ruins as the sun was climbing toward its peak. The trees thinned out, giving way to open ground covered in short purple grass. And beyond the grass, rising from the earth like the bones of a giant, were the remains of a city. The buildings were made of a material that looked like white stone but reflected light in strange ways, almost like crystal. Most of them were broken, Their walls crumbled, their roofs collapsed. But a few still stood, defying the erosion of time. They were tall and elegant, with curved lines and flowing shapes that suggested a species that valued beauty as much as function. Incredible, Vasquez breathed. The architecture is unlike anything I've ever seen. This isn't just old, this is ancient. These buildings must be at least 10,000 years old, maybe older. Older than the collapse? Asked Walker. Much older. The predecessors built this city long before whatever happened to them. This was a thriving metropolis once, home to millions of beings. And now, she gestured at the ruins, now it's just a memory. They entered the city through a wide avenue that had once been paved with the same white crystal as the buildings. The paving was cracked and broken now, with purple grass growing through the gaps, but the outline of the road was still visible. It led them deeper into the ruins, past empty doorways and shattered windows, past statues that had lost their features to weathering, past fountains that had long since run dry. And everywhere they went, they found silence. No voices, no footsteps, no sounds of life, just the wind and the grass and the distant call of the unknown. Over here, called Chen. He had wandered off from the group, drawn by something in one of the intact buildings. I think I found something. They hurried to join him. He was standing in what appeared to be a courtyard, surrounded by walls on three sides. In the center of the courtyard was a pedestal, and on the pedestal was a device. It was small, about the size of a human hand, and shaped like a pyramid. Its surface was covered in symbols that glowed with a faint blue light. Despite being exposed to the elements for thousands of years, it showed no signs of weathering or damage. "What is it?" asked Walker. "I don't know," said Vasquez. She approached the device carefully, her scanner held out in front of her. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our database. It's not electrical, not nuclear, not even quantum. It's something else entirely." "Should we touch it?" asked Tanaka. "Absolutely not," said Okonkwo. "We don't know what it does. It could be a weapon, a trap, anything." But Walker was staring at the device with a strange expression on his face. Something about it called to him, pulled at him like a current in deep water. Before he could stop himself, he reached out and placed his hand on its surface. The world went white. When Walker's vision cleared, he was no longer in the courtyard. He was standing in a vast hall filled with light, surrounded by beings that looked like nothing he had ever seen. They were tall and slender, with bodies that seemed to be made of pure energy. Their faces, if they could be called faces, were serene and beautiful, radiating wisdom and kindness. One of them stepped forward and spoke. Its voice was like music, like 100 instruments playing in perfect harmony. "Welcome, human," it said. "We have been waiting for you." Walker tried to speak, but no words came out. His mind was reeling, struggling to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a hallucination, a trick of the device. "This is not a trick," said the being, as if reading his thoughts. "This is a message, recorded long ago, to be delivered to whichever species was brave enough to ignore the warning and come to this place." "What happened here?" Walker managed to ask. "What destroyed your civilization?" The being's expression changed, becoming sad and weary. "We did not destroy ourselves," it said. "We evolved. We transcended. We became something greater than physical beings, something beyond the understanding of the species that came after us." "Then why the warning? Why seal the planet?" "Because the knowledge we left behind is powerful, too powerful for most species to handle. We feared that it would be misused, that it would cause more harm than good. So we created the warning beacon to keep others away, to protect them from themselves." Walker felt a chill run down his spine. "But we came anyway." "Yes, you did." The being smiled, and its smile was warm and approving. "We knew that eventually a species would come, a species driven by curiosity rather than fear, a species willing to take risks, to push boundaries, to seek knowledge even in the face of danger. We waited 3,000 years for such a species, and now you are here. What do you want from us? Nothing, we want to give you something. The being gestured, and suddenly the hall was filled with images. Planets and stars, galaxies and nebulae, technologies beyond imagining. This is the sum of our knowledge, everything we learned in 50,000 years of civilization, everything we discovered before we transcended. Walker's heart was racing. Why would you give this to us? Because you earned it. You came here despite the warning. You took the risk. You showed courage and curiosity, the two qualities we value most. These are the qualities that allowed us to transcend, and these are the qualities that will allow your species to do the same. The images began to fade, and Walker felt himself being pulled back, away from the Hall of Light, back toward the physical world. Wait, he called out. How do we access this knowledge? How do we learn what you knew? The being's voice echoed in his mind as the vision faded. The device will show you. It will teach you. But be warned, knowledge is a burden as well as a gift. Use it wisely, and it will elevate your species to heights you cannot imagine. Use it foolishly, and it will destroy you, as we feared it would destroy all who came before you. And then Walker was back in the courtyard, his hand still resting on the device, his crew staring at him with expressions of shock and concern. "Captain," said Okonkwo, "what happened? You've been standing there for almost an hour." Walker looked down at the device. It was glowing brighter now, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. "I know why this planet was forbidden," he said slowly. "And I know what we found. It's not a curse or a weapon. It's a gift. The predecessors left us their knowledge, all of it, everything they learned before they evolved beyond physical form." "That's impossible," said Vasquez. "No species could store that much information in a device this small." "You're thinking in human terms," said Walker. "The predecessors were beyond that. They found ways to compress information, to encode it in ways we can't even imagine, and now they're offering to teach us." He looked at his crew, at their faces full of wonder and fear. "This changes everything," he said. "This changes the future of humanity, and we're the ones who found it, because we were curious enough to ignore a warning." The Curiosity rose from the forbidden planet 3 days later, carrying the device and everything it contained. As the ship passed the warning beacon, the ancient signal finally fell silent. Its job was done. After 3,000 years, someone had finally come to claim the gift the predecessors had left behind. The beacon powered down for the last time, and the galaxy would never be the same. The journey back to human space took 3 weeks. During that time, the crew of the Curiosity worked constantly, trying to understand the device they had recovered. Vasquez led the research effort, spending every waking hour studying the pyramid and its strange symbols. She made progress, but slowly. The device was designed for minds far more advanced than human minds, and it took time to adapt. Walker spent much of the journey in his quarters, going through the records and preparing his report for the Galactic Council. He knew that their discovery would cause controversy. The Council had forbidden exploration of Zarvethos for 3,000 years, and humans had ignored that prohibition. There would be consequences, possibly severe ones. But Walker also knew that what they had found was worth any punishment the Council could impose. The knowledge contained in the predecessor device was beyond valuable. It represented 50,000 years of scientific advancement, compressed into a single object. If humans could learn to access that knowledge, to understand it, to use it, they would leap forward by centuries in a single generation. The question was whether the Council would allow them to keep it. They arrived at Station Gamma, the nearest human outpost, on the 22nd day. Walker had sent a message ahead, warning the station commander to expect them and to prepare for a debriefing. He had also sent a coded message to Earth, alerting the United Nations Space Agency to the significance of their discovery. He wanted to make sure that the right people were involved before the Council got wind of what had happened. Station Gamma was a modest facility, a waypoint for ships traveling between the core worlds and the frontier. It was staffed by a skeleton crew of engineers and administrators, none of whom were prepared for what the Curiosity was carrying. Commander Lisa Agu met them in the docking bay. She was a tall woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense attitude, the kind of person who had seen too much to be easily surprised. But even she looked shaken when Walker told her what they had found. "Let me get this straight," she said, after Walker finished his summary. "You landed on a forbidden planet, ignored a 3,000-year-old warning from the Galactic Council, and recovered a device that contains the complete knowledge of an ancient transcendent species." "That's correct," said Walker. "And you expect me to just accept this, to help you smuggle this device back to Earth before the Council finds out?" "I'm not asking you to smuggle anything. I'm asking you to give us time. The Council will want to confiscate the device. They'll say it's too dangerous for humans to possess. They'll lock it away in some vault somewhere and pretend it doesn't exist. I want to make sure that doesn't happen." Agu stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed and shook her head. "You know this is going to cause a diplomatic incident. The Council takes their forbidden zones seriously. They're not going to be happy that a human ship violated one." "I know, but what would you have us do? We found something amazing, something that could change the course of human history. Should we have just left it there? Should we have walked away?" "Most species would have." "We're not most species." That made Agu smile just a little. "No, you're not. That's what I've always liked about humans. You're reckless and stubborn, and you never know when to quit." "Is that a yes?" "It's not a no. Get your people settled in and let me think about this. I need to figure out how to handle this without starting an interstellar war." The crew of the Curiosity moved into the station's guest quarters, while Walker continued his negotiations with Agu. Meanwhile, Vasquez and her team set up a laboratory in one of the station's cargo bays, using equipment they had brought from the ship. They needed to keep studying the device to make progress before the Council arrived. And the Council would arrive. Walker had no doubt about that. The warning beacon on Zarvethos was connected to a network of monitoring stations scattered throughout Council space. The moment the beacon fell silent, alarms would have been triggered. It was only a matter of time before a Council ship came to investigate. The breakthrough came on the third day. Vasquez burst into Walker's quarters just after midnight, her eyes wide with excitement. "Captain, we've done it. We've accessed the device." Walker was on his feet immediately. "Show me." They hurried to the cargo bay laboratory. The rest of the research team was already there, gathered around the predecessor pyramid, which was now connected to a series of human computers through a network of hastily improvised cables. "The device uses a form of data compression that we've never seen before," Vasquez explained as they walked. "It encodes information at the quantum level, storing it in the spin states of particles rather than in conventional binary code. The information density is incredible. This single pyramid contains more data than all the libraries on Earth combined." "How did you access it?" "We didn't, not really. The device accessed us. It's designed to be intuitive, to adapt to the user's cognitive patterns. Once we started interacting with it, it began to translate itself into formats we could understand." They reached the pyramid. It was glowing brighter than before, cycling through a spectrum of colors that seemed to shift and dance. As Walker approached, the colors stabilized, settling into a soft blue that felt strangely calming. "Watch this," said Vasquez. She spoke to the device in a clear voice. "Show us your history." The pyramid responded. A holographic projection appeared in the air above it, displaying images and symbols that formed into a coherent narrative. Walker watched, transfixed, as the story of the predecessors unfolded before his eyes. They had been a species of explorers just like humans. They had spread across their galaxy, building colonies on thousands of worlds, making contact with hundreds of other species. They had been curious and ambitious, always pushing forward, always seeking new knowledge. But as they grew more powerful, they also grew more aware of their limitations. Physical forms were fragile, susceptible to disease and injury and death. Even their advanced technology could not extend their lives indefinitely. So they began to search for a way to transcend those limitations, to become something more than flesh and blood. The research took centuries. Entire generations devoted their lives to the project, building on the work of those who came before. They explored the nature of consciousness, the structure of reality, the boundaries between matter and energy. And finally, after thousands of years of effort, they succeeded. The transcendence was not a sudden event. It was a gradual transformation, a slow shift from physical to non-physical existence. The predecessors did not die. They evolved. They became beings of pure energy, capable of perceiving dimensions and realities that physical beings could not even imagine. But before they left, they made preparations. They knew that other species would eventually reach the level of development they had achieved. They knew that those species would need guidance, would need the knowledge that the predecessors had accumulated over their long history. So they created the devices, the pyramids, and scattered them across the galaxy, waiting for species wise enough and brave enough to find them. "This is incredible," Walker breathed. "They left this for us. They wanted us to find it." "There's more," said Vasquez. "The device doesn't just contain historical records. It contains practical knowledge, technology, science, medicine. Everything the predecessors knew, everything they learned is encoded in this pyramid." "Can we access it?" "We're already starting to. Look at this." Vasquez pulled up a new display showing a series of technical diagrams. "This is a design for a new type of power generator. It produces energy from the quantum vacuum, essentially creating power from nothing. If we can build this, we'll never need fossil fuels or nuclear reactors again. We'll have unlimited clean energy." Walker stared at the diagrams, his mind racing. Unlimited energy, clean and free. It would transform human civilization overnight. "What else is in there?" "We've barely scratched the surface, but we've already found advances in medicine, transportation, computing, everything. There are cures for diseases we thought were incurable. There are propulsion systems that could take us to other galaxies. There are communications technologies that would let us talk to anyone, anywhere, instantaneously." "This is exactly what I was afraid of," said a new voice. Walker turned to see Ambassador Thull standing in the doorway of the cargo bay. Thull was a Velkai, a member of one of the oldest species in the Galactic Council. He was tall and thin, with blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He had arrived at the station an hour ago, leading a council delegation sent to investigate the incident on Zarvethos. "Ambassador," said Walker, keeping his voice calm, "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. I decided to come early. When we received word that the beacon on Zarvethos had gone silent, we were concerned. It seems our concerns were justified." Thull entered the cargo bay, his eyes fixed on the predecessor pyramid. His expression was unreadable, but Walker thought he detected a hint of fear beneath the calm exterior. "You should not have touched this device," said Thull. "You should not have even approached the planet. The warnings were clear." "The warnings were 3,000 years old, and they didn't explain anything. They just said to stay away." "That should have been enough. The Council placed those warnings for good reason." "What reason? You sealed an entire planet, erased most of the records, and told everyone to stay away. But you never explained why. What were you so afraid of?" Thull was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with age and memory. "We were afraid of what you've just found. We were afraid of the knowledge the predecessors left behind. Knowledge that could help humanity advance by centuries. knowledge that could cure diseases and provide unlimited energy. How is that something to be afraid of? Because knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. The predecessors were a great species, but they were also reckless. They pushed too far, too fast. They tampered with forces they didn't fully understand, and in the end, they paid the price. They didn't die, said Vasquez. They transcended. They became something greater than physical beings. So they claimed. But how do we know that's true? We have only their word for it. For all we know, their transcendence was actually extinction, and this device is just a ghost, an echo of a species that destroyed itself through hubris. Walker shook his head. I don't believe that. I spoke with them, Ambassador. When I touched the device, I had a vision. I saw them, the predecessors. They were real. They were alive, and they wanted us to have this knowledge. You had a vision because the device put one in your head. That doesn't make it true. It just makes it convincing. The argument might have continued indefinitely if not for what happened next. The pyramid, which had been glowing steadily throughout the conversation, suddenly flared with brilliant light. Everyone in the room shielded their eyes, and when the light faded, there was a new figure standing beside the device. It was a predecessor, or at least a projection of one. The same tall, slender form made of pure energy that Walker had seen in his vision. The same serene face radiating wisdom and kindness. Ambassador Thull, the figure said, its voice like music. We have been waiting for this moment. Thull took a step back, his composure finally breaking. What is this? We are the predecessors. Or rather, we are an aspect of the predecessors, a fragment left behind to guide those who found our gift. We have been watching your council for 3,000 years, waiting to see if any species would be brave enough to come to Zarvethos despite the warning. You set this up, said Thull, his voice shaking. The warning beacon, the sealed planet, all of it, it was a test. It was more than a test, it was a filter. Most species, when faced with a warning, will obey. They will turn away, avoid the forbidden zone, and go about their lives. This is the safe choice, the cautious choice. But it is not the choice that leads to growth. The figure turned to look at Walker and his crew. Humans are different. They came despite the warning. They explored the forbidden ruins. They let their curiosity guide them, even when fear told them to turn back. This is the quality we were looking for. This is why we chose to reveal ourselves. You chose humans, said Thull. Of all the species in the galaxy, you chose humans. We did not choose. Humans chose themselves. They proved their worthiness by their actions, not by our decree. The knowledge in this device is now theirs to use as they see fit. Thull looked at Walker, then at the device, then back at the predecessor projection. His expression was conflicted, torn between anger and resignation. The Council will not accept this, he said finally. We cannot allow one species to possess such advanced technology. It would upset the balance of power in the galaxy. The balance of power has always been an illusion, said the predecessor. Species rise and fall, empires grow and shrink, but the universe continues regardless. What matters is not power but wisdom, and wisdom can only be gained through experience. What would you have us do? Step aside and let humans do as they please with this technology. We would have you help them, share your own knowledge, guide them as they learn. The path to transcendence is long and difficult, but it does not have to be walked alone. The projection began to fade, its form becoming translucent and ghostly. Our time is ending, it said. We have delivered our message and fulfilled our purpose. What happens next is up to you, all of you. Use the gift wisely and it will elevate your entire galaxy. Use it foolishly and it will destroy you. The choice is yours. And then the projection was gone, leaving only the pyramid, still glowing softly in the cargo bay. There was a long silence. Walker looked at Thull, trying to read the ambassador's expression. The Velkai was ancient by human standards, with centuries of experience in galactic diplomacy. He had seen species rise and fall, had watched civilizations bloom and wither. He knew better than anyone what this moment meant. "The Council will want to discuss this," said Thal finally. "There will be debates, arguments, possibly even threats. Many species will be unhappy that humans have been given this advantage." "And what do you think?" asked Walker. Thal was quiet for a moment. Then slowly, a smile spread across his blue face. "I think the predecessors were right about you. Humans are reckless and curious and stubborn, but those are not always bad qualities. Sometimes they're exactly what the galaxy needs." He turned and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. "I will speak on your behalf at the Council. I cannot promise that they will listen, but I will try. In the meantime, I suggest you keep studying that device. If you're going to change the galaxy, you might as well know what you're doing." And with that, he was gone. Walker looked at his crew, at the pyramid, at the cargo bay that had suddenly become the most important room in the galaxy. "Well," he said, "I guess we've got work to do." The months that followed were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. News of the human discovery spread quickly, carried by traders and diplomats and journalists from 100 worlds. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the implications, and for the first time in centuries, there was genuine disagreement among the member species. Some, like the Velkai, supported the human claim to the predecessor technology. They argued that the device had been left for a reason, and that humans had earned the right to use it by their courage and curiosity. Others were more skeptical. They pointed out that humans were a young species, barely 2 centuries into their spacefaring age. Giving them access to technology that was thousands of years ahead of their own development could be dangerous, both for humans and for the galaxy. The debate raged for weeks. There were proposals to confiscate the device, to share it among all species, to destroy it entirely. But in the end, the Council reached a compromise. Humans would be allowed to keep the device and study its contents, but they would be required to share their discoveries with the rest of the galaxy. Any technology derived from the predecessor knowledge would be made available to all species, preventing any one race from gaining an unfair advantage. It was not a perfect solution, but it was one that everyone could accept. Walker and his crew returned to Earth as heroes. They were celebrated in every city, honored by every nation, their faces broadcast on screens across the planet. But Walker himself was uncomfortable with the attention. He had not set out to become famous. He had set out to explore, to discover, to learn. The fame was just an unintended consequence. He threw himself into the work of understanding the predecessor device. Working with scientists from a dozen countries, he helped to decode its contents, translating ancient knowledge into forms that humans could understand and use. The progress was slow at first, but it accelerated as they developed better tools and methods. Within a year, they had cracked the secret of the quantum vacuum generator. The first prototype was built in a laboratory in Switzerland, and when it was activated, it produced more energy than all the power plants on Earth combined. Clean, unlimited, and virtually free. Within 5 years, they had developed new propulsion systems based on predecessor designs, ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of years. Suddenly, the universe was not so vast and empty anymore. Suddenly, every star was within reach. Within a decade, they had revolutionized medicine. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were cured overnight. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all of them consigned to history. Human lifespans doubled, then tripled. For the first time, death was not inevitable but a choice. And as humans advanced, they shared their discoveries with the rest of the galaxy, just as they had promised. The Galactic Council, which had once viewed humans with suspicion and condescension, began to look at them with new respect. Here was a species that had been given an incredible gift, and instead of hoarding it, they had chosen to share it freely. Other species began to change as well. Inspired by the human example, they started taking more risks, exploring more forbidden zones, questioning more old assumptions. The galaxy was waking up, shaking off the caution and fear that had held it back for millennia. Ambassador Thull became one of the leading advocates for this new era of exploration. He traveled from world to world, speaking to councils and assemblies, urging other species to embrace the spirit of curiosity that had driven humans to Zarvethos. Some listened, some did not. But slowly, gradually, the culture of the galaxy began to shift. 20 years after the discovery, Walker stood on the bridge of a new ship, the Endeavour, as it prepared to leave the galaxy entirely. They were heading for Andromeda, 2 million light-years away, on a journey that would have been impossible just a generation ago. The crew was human and Velkai and a dozen other species, all of them united by the same drive to explore the unknown. "Hard to believe it's been 20 years, said Okonkwo, now gray-haired but still strong. He had refused to retire, insisting that he wanted to see what was out there beyond the edges of the known universe. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," said Walker, "and sometimes it feels like a lifetime." "What do you think we'll find out there?" "I don't know, that's the whole point," Walker smiled, looking out at the stars. "The predecessors found a way to transcend physical existence. Maybe we will too someday. Or maybe we'll find something completely different, something we can't even imagine right now." "Does that scare you?" "A little, but it excites me more. That's what being human is all about, isn't it? Feeling the fear and going anyway, embracing the unknown instead of running from it." The Endeavour's engines powered up, filling the ship with a deep, resonant hum. In a few moments, they would jump to faster-than-light speed, leaving the Milky Way behind forever. They were heading into the darkness between galaxies, into regions of space that no living being had ever explored. And they were going with open eyes and open hearts, driven by the same curiosity that had led Walker to a forbidden planet and a buried pyramid. The warning beacon on Zarvethos had been silent for 2 decades now, but its message had not been forgotten. It was just that humans had proved, once and for all, that some warnings were meant to be ignored. The stars awaited, and humanity was ready to meet them. 500 years after the discovery on Zarvethos, humanity had spread across the universe. They had colonized thousands of galaxies, made contact with millions of species, built wonders that defied imagination. They were no longer the young, reckless race that had ignored a warning beacon and stumbled upon ancient knowledge. They were a mature civilization, respected and admired throughout the cosmos. But they had not forgotten where they came from. On a small world at the edge of the Milky Way, a monument stood in the center of an ancient ruin. It was a simple structure, just a stone pillar with words carved into its surface. The words were in a dozen languages, human and alien, and they told the story of a ship called the Curiosity and a captain named James Walker who had dared to explore where others feared to tread. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the monument. They walked through the purple forests and stood among the crystal buildings, imagining what it must have been like for those first explorers to set foot on this forbidden world. They read the words on the pillar and felt a connection to those long-ago humans who had changed the course of history. Captain Maya Walker stood before the monument now, reading the inscription for the 1,000th time. She was the direct descendant of James Walker, 7 generations removed, and she had spent her life carrying on his legacy. She had explored regions of space that her ancestor could not have dreamed of. She had made discoveries that had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge even further. And yet, she always came back here, to this place where it all began. "You're thinking about him again," said her companion, a Velkai named Thull the Younger. He was the great-grandson of the original Ambassador Thull, and like his ancestor, he had devoted his life to fostering cooperation between species. "I always think about him when I'm here," said Maya. "He was the one who started everything. Without him, without his curiosity and his courage, none of this would exist. Humanity would still be a minor species, huddling on the edges of the galaxy, afraid to reach for the stars." Perhaps, but he would say that it wasn't about him. It was about what humans are, their nature, their drive to explore and discover. He was humble like that. All great leaders are. They walked through the ruins together, following the same path that James Walker had walked 5 centuries ago. The crystal building still stood, preserved by a force field that the Galactic Council had erected after the planet was open to visitors. The purple trees still grew, their branches spreading toward the sky. The silver ocean still sparkled in the distance. But there was something new as well. In the courtyard where the predecessor pyramid had once stood, there was now a museum. It housed artifacts from across human history, telling the story of their rise from a single planet to a galaxy-spanning civilization. And at the center of the museum, protected by the most advanced security systems in the universe, was the original device that had started it all. The pyramid still glowed, just as it had when James Walker first touched it. It still contained the knowledge of the predecessors, still offered wisdom and technology to anyone brave enough to seek it. But humans no longer needed to access it directly. They had already absorbed most of its contents, had already built upon its foundation to create technologies that even the predecessors had never imagined. "We've come so far," said Maya, standing before the pyramid. "And yet there's still so much we don't know. The universe is infinite and we've barely scratched the surface." "That's what makes it exciting," said Thul the Younger. "If we knew everything, there would be nothing left to discover. The journey would be over." "I don't think the journey is ever over. Not really. Every discovery just leads to more questions, more mysteries, more opportunities to explore. That's what my ancestor understood. That's why he ignored the warning and came to this planet. And that's why his descendants will continue exploring, long after we're gone." Maya nodded. She looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear as the sun set behind the distant mountains. Somewhere out there, ships were traveling between galaxies, probes were exploring uncharted dimensions, and scientists were pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The legacy of the curiosity lived on, carried forward by generation after generation of explorers. "There's something I've been thinking about," she said. "The predecessors transcended physical existence. They became beings of pure energy, existing beyond the limits of space and time. Do you think humans will ever do the same?" "It's possible," said Thul the Younger. "The technology exists, the knowledge exists, but transcendence is a choice, not an inevitability. The predecessors chose to leave the physical world behind. Humans may choose differently." "What would you choose?" "I don't know. On one hand, the idea of existing forever, of experiencing dimensions and realities beyond imagination, is incredibly appealing. But on the other hand, there's something to be said for physical existence, for the feel of wind on your skin, for the taste of food, for the warmth of another person's touch." Maya smiled. "You've become quite philosophical in your old age." "I learned from the best. My ancestor spent centuries thinking about these questions after the discovery on Zarvethos. He never found definitive answers, but he never stopped looking for them. That's the human influence. We've infected your species with our curiosity." "Yes, you have, and we're grateful for it." They left the museum as night fell over the planet. The stars were brilliant now, millions of points of light scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Maya looked up at them and felt a sense of wonder that she had felt since childhood, a wonder that had never faded no matter how many stars she had visited. This was what it meant to be human, not power or conquest or domination, but wonder, the ability to look at the universe and feel amazed by its beauty and complexity, the desire to understand, to explore, to discover, the courage to face the unknown and embrace it. James Walker had understood this 500 years ago, when he had decided to ignore a warning and land on a forbidden planet. He had known that curiosity was the greatest gift that evolution had given to humanity, the quality that set them apart from all other species. And he had trusted that gift, had followed it into the darkness, and had emerged with treasures beyond imagination. His descendants had inherited that gift. They had carried it across the galaxy and beyond, spreading it to every world they touched. The universe was vast and mysterious and full of wonders, and humans were determined to explore every corner of it. The journey was not over. It would never be over. As long as there were stars in the sky and questions to be answered, humans would keep exploring, keep discovering, keep pushing the boundaries of the possible. And somewhere in a realm beyond physical existence, the predecessors were watching. They had seen countless species rise and fall over the eons, had witnessed civilizations bloom and wither, had observed the eternal cycle of creation and destruction. But humans were different. Humans were special. Humans had the spark of curiosity that could illuminate the universe. The predecessors had given humanity their knowledge as a gift, a seed to be planted and nurtured. And humanity had taken that seed and grown it into a mighty tree, a tree whose branches reached across galaxies and whose roots extended into the foundations of reality itself. It was exactly what the predecessors had hoped for. It was exactly what they had planned. And it was only the beginning. The last line of the inscription on the monument summed it up perfectly, the words that James Walker had chosen to represent his legacy. Curiosity is not a weakness, it is our greatest strength. The universe is full of warnings telling us to stay away, to be afraid, to accept our limitations. Ignore them, explore the forbidden places, ask the forbidden questions, seek the forbidden knowledge. This is what it means to be human. This is what it means to be alive. 500 years later, those words still rang true. And they would continue to ring true for as long as humanity existed, for as long as there were stars to explore and mysteries to unravel. The forbidden ruins had been explored. The ancient knowledge had been uncovered. And humanity had proved once and for all that the greatest discoveries come not from caution and fear, but from curiosity and courage. The universe had warned them to stay away. They had come anyway. And they would never stop coming.